I used to believe that if I just reached the next milestone, the rest of my life would finally make sense. My name is Daniel. I'm 79 years old, and for most of my life I thought success and fulfillment were the same thing. It took me nearly 8 decades to understand that they are not, and that realization arrived much later than I wish it had. I grew up in a small house where practicality mattered more than dreams, and from an early age I learned what a successful life was supposed to look like. You worked hard, you kept your head down, you earned respect, and you provided. Nobody talked much about happiness or meaning. Those things were considered luxuries, or worse, distractions. So I followed the path laid out in front of me without questioning it, because that's what responsible people did back then. I was good at school, not because I loved learning, but because praise felt safe. I studied what promised stability, not what stirred anything inside me. When I got my first job, I remember the pride on my father's face more clearly than the job itself. That pride became a kind of fuel. Every promotion felt like proof that I was doing life correctly. Each raise quieted the small, uncomfortable voice that sometimes asked whether this was all there was. By my 40s, I had everything I was told to want. A respectable career, a home that impressed visitors, a schedule full of obligations that made me feel important. People used words like accomplished and dependable when they talked about me. I wore exhaustion like a badge of honour and told myself that the weight I felt in my chest was just the price of success. I didn't notice how rarely I laughed, or how often I postponed the things I cared about, always telling myself I'd get to them later. Later became my favourite word. Later, when work slowed down. Later, when the kids were older. Later, when I had earned the right to rest. I missed small moments without realising they were small at the time. I left dinners early to answer calls that no one remembers now. I nodded through conversations while my mind stayed tethered to the office. I was present in body but rarely in spirit, and I told myself that sacrifice was noble, even when it hollowed me out. The first crack appeared after I retired. I'd imagined retirement as a long exhale, the reward at the end of a disciplined life. Instead, I woke up one morning with nowhere to be and felt strangely lost. Without meetings and deadlines, the days stretched wide and unfamiliar. I realised I'd spent so many years proving my worth that I didn't know who I was without something to prove. I tried filling the time with hobbies I thought I should enjoy. Golf, travel, busy work that looked good in photographs. But the emptiness lingered, quiet and persistent. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself loudly. It showed up in the evenings when the house was still and I had nothing left to distract myself from my own thoughts. That's when I started asking questions I had avoided my entire life. One afternoon, I found an old notebook tucked away in a drawer. It was something I'd started in my early 20s, back when I still believed I might become a writer. The pages were filled with observations, small stories, and questions about what made life meaningful. I sat there reading my younger self's words, and I felt an ache I didn't have language for yet. That young man wasn't chasing status. He was chasing understanding. Somewhere along the way, I convinced him to be quiet. That's when it finally became clear to me. Success is about meeting expectations, often other people's. Fulfillment is about meeting yourself. Success gave me structure, security, and approval. Fulfillment was waiting patiently in the corners I kept postponing, in the relationships I rushed through, in the curiosity I neglected. It wasn't that my life had been a failure. It was that I'd confused motion with meaning. I thought about the conversations I never finished, the apologies I delayed until they felt awkward, the interests I dismissed because they didn't come with applause. I realised that the most important moments of my life weren't the ones that advanced my career. They were the quiet ones I barely noticed at the time, moments of connection, honesty and presence that didn't look impressive from the outside. Understanding this at 79 is a strange thing. There is gratitude in it because clarity is always a gift. But there is also grief because time does not expand to meet new wisdom. You learn to live with both. I don't dwell on regret the way I once did. Regret can become another way of avoiding the present if you're not careful. Instead, I try to live the years I have left with a different measure of success. Now, success for me looks like listening without checking the clock. It looks like choosing conversations over accomplishments. It looks like doing small things simply because they make me feel awake and human. Fulfillment didn't arrive with a grand revelation. It arrived quietly, when I finally stopped asking what a successful man should do and started asking what kind of man I wanted to be. If you're listening to this and you're younger than I am, I won't tell you to abandon ambition or responsibility. Those things have their place. I only hope you don't confuse them with meaning the way I did. Pay attention to the parts of yourself that don't fit neatly into a resume. They're not obstacles, they are clues. At 79, I've learned that a successful life can look very full from the outside and still feel unfinished inside. Fulfillment asks different questions, quieter ones, and it waits patiently for you to answer. I just wish I'd listened sooner.